Lord Rule aka Mega Blitz. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the top 5 best rogue decks to be playing right now in our Stellar Crown format, right before like Surging Sparks comes out. The best rogue decks to be playing right now. Now, this is something where this is kind of all just my opinion and kind of based on a little bit of statistics and things of that nature and what I feel like are decks that have good matchups into the top meta decks. Things like Charizard, Dragapult, Regidrogo. I'm even thinking of things like Raging Bolt. And I would even dare to say things like Snorlax Stall, Pidgeot Control. Things that are like the top 10 or top 15 on like the Limitless page and up. I feel like those are kind of the meta decks. And then below that is where you kind of get into the rogue decks and things like that. So that's kind of how I determined what decks are rogue decks, what decks are meta decks, and just cooked up and just kind of found the top 5 best rogue decks to be playing right now based on their matchup percentages, their flexibility and what they can do, and things like that. So let's jump right in to that 5th spot. Alrighty, here we are at that 5th spot with Gouging Fire EX. Now, this is a lot of the deck lists that we're going to be seeing here are just off of online tournaments and things like that. But a lot of these decks have had their spotlight like in the day 2 at whatever regional. I know Gouging Fire had made a day 2 at a regional somewhat recently. I believe it was playing like an Iron Valiant type variant as opposed to the Walking Wake and stuff we see in this deck list here. But I feel like Gouging Fire is not a bad deck by any means. I feel like you have a lot of cool things that you can do with that Walking Wake, kind of just a little bit extra, being able to hit things for that water weakness, being able to sawdust to it as well can be very helpful. And we see here Gouging Fire being kind of the main attacker with its Blaze Blitz attack, 260 damage. You can't use this attack unless it moves out of the active spot, but then you can put it back and use that Blaze Blitz attack again for 260 damage. So being able to hit for 260 damage is pretty good. Now, we've seen it paired with Iron Valiant to be able to attack you on Bix, get to that 280 that it really likes to get to, but we also have the Entei V in here as a backup attacker, the Squawkabilly for that Squawk and Seize to be able to just discard our hand, motivate to get some other energies attached to our Pokemon. We have the Hearthflame Ogerpon EX, which is pretty cool. It has a couple different attacks for 140 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, before doing damage, you discard all energy attached to this Pokemon, but then you get to do more damage. So you get the hit for some pretty big numbers with that. We have the Flutter Mane in here as well to be able to attack with. Its Hex Hurl attack is just 3 colorless. So you can put your Jet energies or the Fire energies or even the Water energy on that Flutter Mane and 90 damage to the active and then 2 damage counters onto your pinch Pokemon in any way you like. And it has that Midnight Fluttering ability. As long as Pokemon's in the active spot, you shut off your opponent's active Pokemon's ability, which can be pretty helpful. We also have the Lumineon for the Luminous Sign, Tatsugiri for the Attract Customers, to be able to find a supporter, Mew for the Pivot and the Draw Engine, same with Greninja for that Draw Engine, Fezandipiti. Almost every deck plays Fezandipiti right now, unless you're like a control deck or... Honestly, I think that's it. Pretty much everything plays Fezandipiti except a handful of decks. Fezandipiti, flip the script. Cruel Arrow is not a bad attack if need be. I just feel like Gouging Fire is kind of one of those decks where it can get there. It's really fast, it's really aggressive, it's very similar to Roaring Moon in that regard, and it takes a lot of decent matchups. It's 50-50 in just about anything. You have a really tough time into decks that kind of are bigger. Things like Charizard can be a little tough. Raging Bolt is just faster than you, which can be a little awkward as well. But since you can go pretty quickly, that 260 damage can be very helpful, being able to just jet energies, you know, energy switch, move things around, rescue board, retreat out. You have the switch card to put it back in the active spot, put the Mew up, retreat out of the Mew. You have some pretty cool things that you can do, and that's why Gouging Fire is here in that 5th spot. It's a little clunky at times and kind of awkward with how its numbers set up, but it can get there. So moving to the next spot here, we have an Ancient Box deck. Now, this deck here is playing for Great Tusk as opposed to the Koraidon, and I feel like the reason for that is Koraidon right now isn't the greatest into the meta. A lot of the decks right now discard or draw so many cards that just milling it in itself can be very helpful. Things like Regidrogo can go through literally half its deck or more in one single turn. So sometimes your win condition is just Great Tusk, mill 4, and just pull something up in the active spot they don't want there, and then just mill some cards, and then just keep having that recycling going. I feel like it's pretty helpful. It's also really good into like the control matchups, things like Stall, where you're just like, okay, Explorer's Guidance or Sada's, mill 4 cards. Especially things with like control, you're using that instant charge ability quite often, so you're also drawing tons of cards. And I feel like that's why there's 4 copies of that Great Tusk in here. And then, of course, Roaring Moon is our main attacker with that Vengeance Fletching 70+. This attack does 10 more damage for each ancient card in our discard pile. We have the 4 copies of Flutter Mane for that disruption element, plus just kind of getting things to your discard pile. And the Hex Hurl attack is really good, as we mentioned in the Gouging Fire deck list. And then we have the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, prevent all damage done from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. Now, we're never attacking with this Pokemon because we don't have a fighting energy in the deck. You could just put 1 in there just to have it if you really wanted to, but I will say this card really helps out in your Charizard matchup because Ancient Box and just things like that have always had a hard time into like the bigger decks, things like Charizard or Dragapult. You've always had a tough time into those decks, and this Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon really helps out in that Charizard matchup because you can just put it up in the active spot and then just leave it sit there, and Charizard can't really do anything about it because almost all of their attackers, if not all of the attackers, have an ability in the deck. So you just put it up there and pass. You have the Radiant Greninja in here for that concealed cards, be able to draw some extra cards, discard some energy, so then you can put them onto your Pokemon with Sada's Vitality. Then we have the Petron EX in here. Once during your turn, you may switch one of your benched Dark-type Pokemon, except any Petron EX with your active Pokemon. If you do, the new one is damaged. You can also attack with Petron EX, but we don't really do that a lot of the times. We're using it just so we can switch our Roaring Moons up into the active spot, punch for some damage, and then keep that rolling. 4 Sadas, 4 Explorer's Guidance. We got the 1 boss in here, 4 Earthen Vessel. We play the Secret Box in here as well. Secret Box has kind of just been the like go-to A-spec for Ancient Box decks, I feel like. And the reason for that is you discard some of the clunky cards out of your hand, and then you go find a tool, a supporter, a stadium, and I believe it's also an item card as well. So Secret Box being really helpful in that regard. We are still playing Pokestops and things like that. Got the Spirit Energy Retrieval, PAL Pad. I feel like Ancient Box is a pretty solid deck. The reason it's down here in the Rogue decks, because it used to not be, is just because Dragapult's at the top of the meta, Charizard's at the top of the meta, Regidrogo's also tough for you to deal with as well, and just a lot of the decks that kind of at the top right now, Ancient Box doesn't do super great into those decks, but we can still change some cards around here to help out in those matchups, things like that Great Tusk, the Flutter Mane, and that Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX as well. So going into our third spot here, we have Arc Armarouge. Now, Arc Armarouge is quite an interesting deck. Arceus has been a card that's been around for quite some time now, came out of the Brilliant Stars set, and we've seen all different kinds of Arceus variants. We've had Arctina, we've had Arc Superior Counter Meta deck, we've had Arc Armarouge, we have Arc Hand Control, we had Arceus Pikachu. Arceus has had tons of different just partners paired with it many times, but Arc Armarouge has been one of the kind of ones that have stuck around a little bit with that Armarouge ability Fire Off once during your turn. As often you use it like during your turn, you may move a fire energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. Now, this really helps with things like Radiant Charizard, Delphox V, that Gouging Fire EX, being able to use that Combustion Blast, or that magical, I believe it's Magical Fire or something, 120 damage. Then you hit some things on the bench, which is pretty cool. That Gouging Fire with that Blaze Blitz attack. But we can also move those energies because it doesn't say to a fire type Pokemon. So we can move those Pokemon to Mew EX in the Charizard matchup if the prizes get pretty crazy, and then genome hacking, or we can even just genome hacking other Pokemon that are in the meta right now. Things like Roaring Moon come to mind, other Iron Hands come to mind, or even just like, all right, genome hacking, I'm going to pick your Teal Mask Ogerpon and punch. Raging Bolt is another one, discard a bunch of energies and just Bellowing Thunder for huge damage. Mew EX is really kind of adaptable in this deck, and I really like it for that. But also, we can move those energies to our Iron Hands EX, which is very helpful for that amp you very much attack to take some extra prize cards in a lot of different matchups. Things like Gardevoir, Lost Box, early game for Charizard or Dragapult, or even Palkia, being able to just amp you very much, 240, take 3 prize cards. It's really good into those decks. The unfortunate part for Armarouge, though, is it has 130 HP, and for that, it does get KO'd instantly by a Cursed Blast, which feels pretty bad, as opposed to Ancient Box, where it has 140 HP, so you're still safe from a Cursed Blast, but with Armarouge, not so much. But I do like this deck a lot. We have the Monkey Dory in here as well to be able to just kind of move some damage counters off of our Pokemon, because we are playing 4 copies of that Magma base, and once during your turn, you may attach a Fire Energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Fire Pokemon. If you do, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. Monkey Dory with that Luminous Energy, move the damage counters, punch something, you know, with your Arceus to power up your other Pokemon like your Delphox V, another Arceus on the bench, and then you can just fire off and move all those energies around, which is pretty cool. I really think Arc Armarouge is a really solid deck, and I've actually been playing it a little bit in my off time and having tons of fun with it. I think Arc Armarouge has that disruption element with that 4 Iono, it has the 2 counter catcher, and it has that Monkey Dory to move damage counters around, and we have tons of different cool attackers in here like the Iron Hands, the Delphox, the Gouging Fire. You can even attack with Fezandipiti if you need to as well, and I feel like Arc Armarouge is just kind of one of those decks where somebody tends to just make it into day 2 with it every once in a while, and it's still around. I see it in online tournaments. I actually just played against it in an online tournament a couple days ago and didn't really know how the matchup went, because Arc Armarouge is one of those decks where it's still around, and it's still, and the people that play Arc Armarouge and know how to play it well, we consistently do well with it. And Arc Armarouge, I feel like it's just a good deck right now, being able to kind of just manipulate and move energies to the things you want for specific matchups. Like I said, with that Iron Hands, Delphox, Gouging Fire, Monkey Dory to be able to move damage counters around, so we hit that 280 damage because we can go Gouging Fire, 260, Monkey Dory before that with the Adrenal Brain, 280, boom, we're hitting the numbers we want to hit, which is pretty huge. Now, moving into number 2, we have Luxray Control. Now, Luxray Control is a deck that has really piqued my interest as of lately. I've been playing a lot of Pidgeot Control, a lot of Stall, a lot of Iron Thorns, and this is a control deck that I knew was around, but just really never gave it the time of day. And I've seen it do well in online tournaments, and it has a pretty good win rate as well at like 55% total online. It takes a lot of decent matchups into things. You absolutely cook Lugia most of the time. You do really good into Palkia because you're hitting them for weakness with your Luxray. But then you also have that control element where you have, like, you know, your Misfortune Sisters, your Giacomo, you have Thornton, so you can do cool plays with that. You have the Eerie to shred your opponent's hand. You have Technical Machine De-Evolution as well. You have the Luxray V with that Fang Sight to be able to shred your opponent's hand. I feel like this is just a deck that, once again, just consistently does well, and the people that know how to play it will play it well. And the first people that come to my mind is people like All Out Blitzel, who really plays a lot of Pidgeot Control and a lot of other just different control decks, and has played Luxray Control a decent amount, and actually, I believe, made a masterclass for free on that. So if you want a lot of those tips and tricks on how to play Luxray to kind of better profession per se, definitely check out that stuff, because All Out Blitzel is the person that I go to, or the videos that I look at when I want to get better at playing control, just because that's a lot of control videos on that channel. So definitely check those out. But some of the key things I do want to point out is that Luxray V with that Fang Snipe. It only does 30 damage, but you put the DTE on it, you're doing 10, which doesn't matter. You're not really going for damage a lot of the times in a control deck, but Fang Snipe, you're able to look at your opponent's hand, and then you reveal a trainer card from there and discard it. So being able to get rid of support and stuff is really nice. And then, of course, we also have that quick search ability to be able to find those pieces that we want. Things like, you know, Xerxiax Machinations, be able to discard your opponent's hand, and the other control matchups, Misfortune Sisters, Giacomo, Eerie, Roseanne's backup to put, you know, an energy or a stadium or something back into your hand, like that Neo Epa energy we have as well. And I feel like you also have that Piercing Gaze as well with that Luxray EX. Your opponent reveals a card from their hand, you discard any card you find there. So being able to just pick any card and just shred it out of the hand. So being able to go, okay, I'm going to Eerie, discard your Rare Candy and your Ultra Ball out of your hand. I'm going to Piercing Gaze. I'm going to discard your whatever, Forest Sealstone out of your hand. Your turn. And then you can slowly win by taking prize cards, or just completely shredding and locking your opponent out of the game, discarding all their items, which I think is really cool. And I think Luxray EX is a deck that I definitely will play more in the future. Just been playing a lot of Stall, Thorns, and Bird control lately, but Luxray EX is on my radar. It has a lot of the good matchups that Stall has, things like if you're able to like discard the rare candies from your Charizard opponent or your Palkia Dusknoir opponent and hitting their Palkias for weakness on top of that. Lugia as well is a good matchup, hitting them for weakness. But if you're able to discard those rare candies and just the other key pieces in those matchups where they need to be able to go, okay, rare candy into my Charizard, rare candy into my Pidgeot, or rare candy into my Dusknoir, if you're able to discard those key pieces, you can just run away with the game, which I think is really, really cool and something that a lot of control decks kind of take the advantage of where the format is in a position where it's a very combo heavy. Control usually can slow a lot of these combo decks down because you can pick apart the pieces that they need for their combos. And right now we're in a very combo-centric format, and I feel like a lot of the control decks we have right now are very good and are very well positioned in the meta. Iron Thorns, Stall, Bird Control, and Luxray Control as well. Luxray Control just doesn't get the kind of respect that the other three control decks get, but it really should be on your radar. I think it's a great rogue deck right now, and I really think if you're looking to play a control deck and you're kind of tired of playing the other ones, definitely check this one out. Now, I did say top 5, but we have an honorable mention here, and this is going to be the Venomoth Frostlass kind of deck, and I've never really been a huge fan of this deck, but it is a good deck when played properly. You have that Venomoth with its perplexing powder attack, 30 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards from their hand. That's very helpful, being able to item lock your opponent out of the game. Making them confused makes it difficult to have attacks. And then you have the Freezing Shroud ability as well. During Pokemon Checkup, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon that have an ability in play. So you're also putting damage counters, you know, essentially on your own Monkey Dory, on your Manaphy it's in play, Frostlass, things like that. But we got that Monkey Dory in here for that Adrenal Brain to be able to move our damage counters off of our Pokemon to slowly take knockouts on our opponent's Pokemon while item locking them and confusing them throughout the whole game. We also have Neutralization Zone as the ace-spec of choice in here. And the reason for this stadium to be the ace-spec of choice is because it basically says it's prevented all your Pokemon that don't have a rule box are prevented from damage from attacks of Pokemon that do have rule boxes. Things like EXs and Vs all have rule boxes. So your baby Pokemon like your Venomoth and Frostlass and Monkey Dories are protected with that Neutralization Zone. Now the unfortunate part is with Neutralization Zone, once it's discarded, you can't get it back, which feels kind of bad. But if they can't discard it, sometimes it just kind of wins you games, which is pretty cool. So the only reason it's in here in the honorable mention and not in the top 5 is just because it's very frail, and if you know what they're trying to do and you know how to pick apart their kind of strategy, it's very easy to beat a Venomoth Frostlass deck. But the other reason why it's here just as a rogue deck and an honorable mention is because item lock is good right now in the meta. We've seen that with Banette Gardevoir being able to lock people out of the game. You can't play your rare candy. You can't play your Night Stretchers. You can't play your counter catchers. You can't play Super Rod. You can't play your item cards from your hand. Sure, go, you know, Arven and find an item card. You can't play it, which is pretty cool as well. We see Monkey Dory always do well in a lot of decks as well. That Adrenal Brain being able to move damage counters. And Frostlass being able to just keep ticking damage counters on Pokemon that have an ability. And a lot of Pokemon right now have abilities in our meta. Charizard, Lugia, I can't even, like, Ogerpon, Regidrogo, all these, Fezandipiti's in so many decks. Squawkabilly also gets played a lot in decks right now. All these Pokemon have abilities, and for that reason, that's why it made it here as an honorable mention, because I do like this deck and I do think it has potential, but the problem is if you know how to play against it, and you can't set up that item lock or anything like that, and it's kind of inconsistent at times and pretty clunky, which is why we see that 4 Carmine in there, so you can just discard and draw more cards to get set up quickly, because if you don't get set up and your opponent can start rolling and getting all their stuff set up before you just automatically lose most of the time, which is unfortunate. But I did want to put it in here because I do think it is a cool deck, and item lock right now is a very good strategy in our meta, and like I said, we've seen that with Banette Gardevoir doing so well. Now, let's take a look at our number 1 deck here. Cloth Electrode. Now, Cloth Electrode is a deck that has been around. Before rotation, we had seen Cloth Electrode do pretty well when Charizard was very dominant in our meta because Electrode was able to hit it for insane high damage because of that weakness, but also Electrode V can attack for free with its Tantrum Blast attack 100 times. This attack does 100 damage for each special condition that's affecting this Pokemon. So back then we had the Spicy Season Curry to give it burn damage as well, and then we also had the Brute Bonnet in there with the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule to then poison it and hit for huge numbers with the Electrode. Same with Cloth. Back then, a lot of Arceus decks were still around, and Cloth was able to hit those for weakness, and Miraidon was very relevant, hitting that for weakness with its Unhinged Scissors attack for 2 colorless energy, 30 plus. If this attack is affected by a special condition, it does 160 more damage. So, able to hit for some pretty high damage on a single prize Pokemon. Also hitting for weakness was really cool, and we've seen Cloth Electrode kind of come back out of the woodworks a little bit with its Petrarun partner, Radiant Hisuian Sneasler. We have the Fezandipiti now to draw cards and stuff. But with this Petrarun, it has an ability that says as long as Pokemon's in the active spot, you put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon during Pokemon checkup. So you can do this really cool thing where you can actually just turn 1 win the game without pretty much anything even happening, which is pretty cool. So basically what you have to do is you have to get our Brute Bonnet into play, attach the Future Booster Energy Capsule, and then you have to hope that they have like a 70 HP or an 80 HP thing, and then you go, okay, I'm going to poison both of us with my Petrarun in the active. It's going to take 5, but it's also going to take, you know, the extra damage because we have Radiant Hisuian Sneasler in play, put two more damage counters on it as well. So then you're literally in a position where, okay, you started Lone Charmander, 70 HP, I'm going to KO it with special conditions. And let's go next, game 2. Sorry, you should have benched something else. And I actually saw this happen when I was playing at the Louisville Regionals. My opponent, I believe it was round 5, sitting next to me was playing Cloth Electrode against the Charizard opponent, and they started Lone Pidgey in the active spot, and their opponent just went, okay, Petra, Brute Bonnet, poison damage, go. It's going to get knocked out. You have another bench Pokemon, I win. Let's go game. Next game. And I was like, that is insane, actually. So that is one of the kind of niche reasons why it's up here, but the deck is just really aggressive. Being able to constantly keep attacking with that Cloth, the Hisuian Electrode, we're able to put them back and get the Cloths and stuff back out of our discard pile with things like Night Stretcher we see there. And of course, as well, we have the secret box as our ace spec of choice to be able to set up quickly. We do have a lot of moving pieces in this deck with that Brute Bonnet, the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, you need the Cloth, and you need the tool cards that also come in this deck. Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, Binding Mochi, and you have Rescue Board for a Sealstone as well, super effective glasses to get to those big numbers with your Hisuian Electrode V to hit for bigger damage into decks like Charizard, because right now, the deck is only able to poison itself. We don't have that Spicy Season Curry anymore to burn itself. So we basically go, okay, poison ourselves. We're hitting for, 100 damage. Times that by 2, 200. Not great. Okay, we can go super effective glasses on our Electrode. Hit for 300 plus poison conditions with Brute Bonnet and Radiant Hisuian Sneasler in play. Put two more damage counters on there. We're hitting for more. Or Binding Mochi also works. So you can get to those high numbers that it does need to get to in order to kind of just win games. And once again, Cloth Electrode has done pretty well. I've played against it in a couple online tournaments. There was like 2 or 3 in day 2 at Louisville. I believe there's like at least 1 or 2 I had heard in day 2 at Lille. It does really well in online tournaments. I think Cloth Electrode is a solid deck to be playing right now, and you have a lot of cool options going forward. Now, already that's going to do it for today's video. If you guys are enjoying the content I've been making stuff for the channel, don't forget to leave a like, smash the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. I want to make sure to put all 6 of these deck lists in the description below, so you guys want to try them out for yourself, you'll be able to. I'm going to at least try to put them in the description depending on my character limit. It might just be a pinned comment. We're going to have to see. But nonetheless, they will be posted. Now, I will see you all in the next one. Peace!